Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to your little slice of the occult for the week. This is the Dark R Podcast, and I am your host, KDG, the living pop culture reference. Before we start, I'd like to point out that this podcast is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to any existing person, living or dead, is purely coincidental. The aim of this podcast is to entertain and nothing else. Have you ever watched a horror movie and found a character who seems to know what's happening? The resident nerd who reads about folklore and tells the main characters what they need to do? Well, over the years, people around me have constantly told me that I was that guy. Fortunately, we don't live in a horror movie. But all the same, I'd like to help my listeners out, just in case they do manage to encounter the unexplained. First of all, a few announcements. I'm happy to tell you all that the Dark Hour podcast has extended its reach across the internet and has found its roots in multiple platforms. You can listen to it now on Spreaker, Spotify, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, and even Geo7. I have no idea how to pronounce that last one, I am very sorry. But I honestly didn't think that it'll get anywhere besides YouTube because I just wanted to share my love of horror to the people. But I am very thankful for everyone who supported me throughout this whole thing. I'm still gonna upload these episodes to YouTube just so people can't access the sites, can still watch and listen to these episodes, but on a personal note, I'd like to say thanks for having this tiny little horror podcast as part of your day. And that's it for my announcements, really. Because I thought I had more news. But I don't plan stuff out. It just sort of happens. In any case, for tonight's topic. Tonight's topic is going to be a doozy and is my own little nostalgia trip back to the admin days. Back then, I'd always get a lot of requests about urban legends here in the Philippines. I'm always happy to oblige because I know a lot of them off the top of my head. For tonight though, as part of our look back in the past, I'm glad to report that we'll be tackling Philippine urban legends. With a bit more research this time, it's not off the top of my head. But what are urban legends? Where do they come from? How the hell to deal with one if one may encounter one? Too many ones in that particular sentence, but worry not, dear listener, for all those questions will be answered by the end of this episode. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as we talk about Philippine urban legends. So let's start with the whole idea of urban legends in general. An urban legend is a story that gets passed around from a friend to a friend of a friend who's experienced it. You never really get the details right, and it gets progressively worse every time you tell it. Some elements get a little bit scary, while others get omitted, but think of it mostly as scary gossip. However, it becomes more apparent that the more it does spread, the more believable it becomes because of the sheer fact that people claim to have experienced this, and at least knew someone who did. Here in the Philippines, we have an abundance of these, from cats being turned into siopaw to full-on murder to use the children's blood for building foundations of buildings. Try saying that 5 times fast. Anyway, of course, there is no way to verify if these are really true or not, as is the nature of urban legends. These were mainly just fun horror stories that were pre-creepypasta, and these were the ones that you can hear from your local barber or albulario, whichever your pick was, or just your neighborhood. It was just stories just being passed around from friends, to creep people out. I dig that. Let's talk about one of the most famous urban legends here in the Philippines. I'm of course talking about the famous Balete... What's that? Sorry, what's that? I already referenced Balete Drive in like the past 2 episodes? Whatever, it still counts, right? Fine. Alright, I was told that we should move on to the next famous urban legend, the snake in Robinson's Galleria. I have to be honest, when I was younger, this was told to me very differently. It wasn't really much of a story so much as a phrase. There's a snake in Robinson's Galleria. The upperclassmen would often tell us this in the schoolyard or on our services while on our way home. It never really came across as something scary to me personally. I never really asked about what the story was because I guess that was all there is. There's a snake in the Galleria and we're supposed to be scared of it. Don't get me wrong, I've dealt with snakes on a few occasions, but I wouldn't really be scared of one. For years, the information lingered in my mind, and I swear, right as I'm typing the script for this episode, I finally had the entire story. Years later. Decades later. Better late than never. So, it wasn't just a snake. It was a human-snake hybrid. A snake man, if you will. The urban legend goes that there's a half-man, half-snake humanoid being that allegedly lurks in the department store. The story is mostly centered around the changing area, and it was said that the snake man thing preyed on innocent women who were trying out clothes in the store. Some would say that it was the deformed twin brother of Robina Gokong Wei, the current CEO of Robinsons. It was kind of like a family secret that they hid the deformed twin brother of Robina Gokong Wei, who turned out normal by the way, inside a special room behind the changing area in a branch of mall that they own. The sibling would often go out of his room to unsuspecting women, much to their shock, and that was basically it. And mind you, this wasn't just a particular branch as along the years, because there were multiple sightings of this snake man thing, again according to the story that goes around. It became more apparent because Alice Dixon, a famous actress at the time, became involved with the story, and it kind of just blew up. The tabloids from the time would even suggest that Miss Dixon had relations with this Snakeman. Snakeman. His name's Snakeman. But that is very unfortunate though. So what really happened? Well, I did find an interview back in 2020, which feels like forever ago when I say it like that, wherein Miss Dixon has finally spoken out against this particular incident because it is the 30th anniversary for it, as she mentions. In any case, she mentions doing a movie shoot taking place in Robinson's Galleria. It was nighttime and she was told to change her clothes in the nearby changing area. So, of course, being a celebrity and having a shoot in a very public place, even at night, there were still a few people trying to get a reaction from her as she went there. So in response, the actress thought it'd be funny if she said tuklaw, tuklaw, which translates to snake bite, to the bystanders trying to get a glimpse of her. This tiny little incident blew out of proportion and somehow turned into a story about Alice Dixon, a famous movie actress at the time, got eaten by a giant snake in Robinson's Galleria, which in turn became a story about a snake man that is apparently related to the Gokong Wei family. I wish I was kidding. See, this is the very nature of the urban legend. As I mentioned, the details get more distorted the more people talk about it. For the record, the tip about how to survive a snake man is to have someone come with you when you go to the changing rooms. I would have wanted to give more, but hey, apparently the snake man's just looking for love. Anyway, on to a creepier story, because here in the Philippines, it's not just these weird body horror image things that are often featured in urban legends. There are more stories like the ones from the hospital, a certain place, a random school. It becomes a little bit more vague, and that's the way it's supposed to be told. So the idea is to protect whatever establishment that particular entity resides. So over the years, we have received, or rather, we've heard about a lot of urban legends that comes from hospitals, the school, or something where my mom's friend of a cousin operated. That's the whole idea for it. Some of these stories are very creepy, mind you, because they're supposed to be. They're supposed to have the creepiness factor of the whole thing is that it can happen to any school. It could be your school, the one you're attending right now. Okay, not right now because there's a pandemic, but like the building where you used to go for school. It can be one of the places where these stories take place. Take for example the one in the elevator. I'm sure you've heard about this story before. There was this doctor who was working late, and he was on the 5th floor for some reason or somewhere higher, and then he wanted to go down because he was going home. So the doctor calls the elevator and steps in, and a floor below him, it stops again because a little lady went in. So this particular lady was wearing some hospital gown, or some say it was pajamas or something along those lines. Basically, it was a patient in the hospital. So they go down and the elevator stops again, and this time there was a man running from down the hall calling out to them to stop the elevator doors from closing. However, the doctor frantically tried to close the door on him, and he succeeded. The door closed just before the man got in. The other patient asked the doctor why he wanted to close the door on the guy immediately. It's not as if the elevator was full. So the doctor, without looking at the woman, mentions that the guy they saw running was already dead, and he could tell because he was the one who operated him, and there is a bracelet that he wore that has his name and basically tells you that he was already dead. The patient then shows her arm to the doctor saying, "You mean like this one?" It's those kinds of story that plays out as an urban legend because people keep talking about it, and it can just be any hospital. They didn't tell you what who the doctor was, who the patient was, who the man was, what hospital were they in, and or even where they were. Hell, it could even not be in the Philippines for all I know. But it's stories like that that gets the juices flowing for horror people like myself, because you start to wonder, did this really happen? Is there someone out there who actually experienced this and told someone? And that particular someone told another one, and another one, and another one, and the truth gets distorted. Because don't get me wrong, I really can't say for 100% that this didn't happen. Because people actually experience these kinds of stuff. We can't really verify if it really happened because it happened in the moment. It's not as if we can do an investigation on it, and even if we did, it's not as credible as the one that experienced it. But then again, it fuels your imagination that this could happen to me, and I really wish it wouldn't. Also, again, if someone's still looking for the tips on these particular urban legend, If this particular scenario happens to you in an elevator, do what I do and just put headphones on while you're in between floors. I lived in a condo for about 8 years back in the day, and I lived on the 6th floor. I took the elevator at least 4 times a day, going up and down, and for all I know, a ghost was with me the entire time, but I couldn't tell because, of course, I had my earphones on. Music saves lives, kids. The last urban legend I'm going to tell is from a school. The best thing about urban legends is they don't have a title really. It's just that phrase, but this one is my favorite because even now I'm still creeped out about it. It's about this girl who's studying in a certain college in the city. She has afternoon classes going on to evening classes, which was pretty standard back in the day. It was around 6 in the evening when she mentions that she needed to go to the bathroom. In her school, the bathrooms were closed at around 5 for cleaning. This would be the time where classes would have ended and only a few people who were attending night classes were the ones who were at school, which is about 20 people at best. This girl, of course, couldn't go to the bathroom while it was being cleaned, but she did hear about one particular bathroom which is always open, but you're not allowed to go to, just the floor over. There were many reasons why she was told not to go there. People say that's where the upperclassmen smoke, that's where the people deal weed, or something along those lines. Basically, it's bad news. But this particular girl needed to go to the bathroom very badly, so she had no choice. She went there. When she opened the door, it was your basic bathroom. A sink, one cubicle, and of course the mirror. She goes to do her business, and after a while, she finishes without any issues, and she goes to wash her hands. She realizes that her makeup needed a bit of a touch-up, so she brings out her makeup kit and just starts doing her makeup. After a few minutes, she hears the door open and another girl comes in. This girl walked with a very apparent limp, and she had her hair all the way down to cover her face. She went inside the cubicle, and the girl assumes was doing her business. As she was finished with her makeup, she started putting things away when she noticed that the girl was already next to her, looking at the mirror. The girl had a crazy look in her eye, and her face was a little bit more disheveled, and she realized that this was no normal student. The girl with a disheveled face looked at the girl with makeup and asked, "Am I beautiful? Am I beautiful?" Slowly at first, and then eventually turns into screams. The girl with the makeup slowly backed away, started to run out. As she was running through the hallway, she kept looking back to see the girl if she was being followed. Usually, this is the part of the story where you assume that there was really no one there. But what makes this story scary is the girl was there. She was chasing this particular girl with her limp, and while doing that, she was still screaming, "Am I beautiful now?" The girl with the makeup eventually reaches her classroom and bursts through the door, screaming her head off. The class, in a visible panic, asked the girl what was wrong. As she was explaining the situation, some of the boys went outside to see if the girl with the limp was still there. They went back in and said there was no one there in the hall. It was just them and their last class. The girl said that the Girl with the limp probably went back to the bathroom and hid there. So the boys decided to go to the bathroom. But when they got there, all they saw were the words, "Am I beautiful now?" scratched on the mirror of that particular bathroom. Up until now, I'm still convinced that this is one of the creepier stories that you can hear as an urban legend. Again, the school was very vague. There is always the forbidden bathroom in the school, the ones where you don't go to or is haunted or something like that. But the sheer horror of what this particular story has is we're not even sure if we're dealing with the paranormal. It may have been just a girl with some personality disorder or something with a bad limp who actually hurt herself and wandered into school. I really don't know, but the idea of it is it can happen. There are open campuses, there are schools, within buildings and buildings. There are so many factors to consider when you try to trace this one particular school. However, I did try to ask around my old school back in college about this particular story because some elements of that story, when it was told to me, felt very familiar in, well, my school. So I asked around, and I swear to this day, I will never forget the face of my professor when I told the story. Halfway through, he just stopped me and said, "I was the professor in that class." That actually happened. And that's it for our overview of some of the urban legends here in the Philippines. I hope you guys are staying safe out there because I'll be doing a lot more of these tips in the next few episodes, and like this one, they'll be up every Sunday at around 8 p.m, so stay tuned. If you like content like this and you want to see more, you can check out previous Dark Hour episodes here on my channel. I made a playlist for it to make it easy for everyone. Again, starting now, not only on YouTube, you can also listen to the Dark Hour podcast on Spotify and all other podcast playing services. I'm very happy that more and more people can be reached by these guides, and hopefully you can use it to survive. I mean, if it really happened. But I also promise to bring you guys more and more horror content as much as I can. Again, this has been the Dark Hour podcast, and I've been KDG saying good fright and good night.